Nicole Cowley, host of Haunted Mid-Atlantic Tales, episode 19. And for Black Rockers United, it's also Read Session 19, where we talked about what independence means and freedom for people who are still disenfranchised and have yet to truly be liberated, such as the African diaspora. We talk about this very often in this series and overall as a descendant of indigenous people, both from the African continent and from Turtle Island. What do we do on a daily basis? Our connectivity to the spiritual plane and our heritage is often very tangible. It's in our food, our choke cherry recipes, right? Our fry bread, our gullah cuisine from our Fula ancestors, right? Fulani, Hausa, etc. And Niger and what's now known as Nigeria, West Africa. How would so much of the South have its wealth if not for the intellectual and cultural wealth of our kinfolk? It's something that, from High on the Hog to my personal journey and my memories that extend to, the homeland, are delving into. And I highly suggest that you look into, once again, the series High on the Hog and gastronomic, that is, food journeys to Africa and within Africa, because one of the easiest ways to go back home is through taste, right? And through sound. What are your experiences with haunted history and places on the East Coast and the Mid-Atlantic? I've talked about mine before, from my basement in Centerville to Midwest, and then coming back here in Montclair, New Jersey, and also in Brooklyn, New York. I would love to hear more, interactive comments from y'all about, things that have happened to you, not just because it's interesting, but because I think it's actually very important to preserve these stories. They're part of our oral tradition, folklore of these states. So let's get into the Ghost of Virginia. Chapter 18, Phantoms in Fauquier County. As I've said before, one of the true pleasures I get in researching for this seemingly never-ending series on Virginia Ghost, author L.B. Taylor Jr. speaking, rest in peace, is when browsing through antiquarian volumes at old bookstores or at antique shows, I come across a genuine find. Such is the case in the spring of 2005, when I came across an obscure and out-of-print book titled Boyhood Memories of Fauquier, written in 1926 by P.A.L. Smith. He was born in 1864, and the content was a chapter on ghost stories. It not only told of his encounters with the paranormal, and with his perception of what he feared were ghosts, but also gave a rare glimpse into life back then in rural Virginia. In his preface, Smith wrote, "Often have I thought of those dear old hills which were called mountains then, right in front of my home, over whose summits I have hunted and played in my boyhood days. The delightful memories connected with Beaver Dam and Broad Run have always filled me with a great deal of pleasure and comfort. I can see High Point when I shut my eyes, and I think about it. The scenes of my childhood can never be effaced from my memory, can never be forgotten and blotted out from the pages of my recollection. Here, then, is a sampling of some scares that Smith encountered in his youth." And before we get further into it, Karis brought up a very good point, a friend of mine, that there's a lot of revisionism, even from people back then, and moral bypassing of what was going on at the time. Context, as many of you know, that was the Civil War. Rural Virginia would have been home to many infights and skirmishes between the Confederate Army and the Union Army, neither of whom have a right to Turtle Island. This is indigenous land. But obviously, that should be a big part of your memory in those childhood days. If you were born in that year, then you would have to live in the legacy of Reconstruction and have to face what is the scar of racism and slavery in the South. So, one evening, when I was about 13, I was sent by Mother to take a basket of daisies and give food to a sick man who lived about a mile from home. That's really sweet. This old gentleman was suffering from a cancer that was about to finally take its hold. and he lay most of the time in bed, waiting for the approach. Frequently, during my father's lifetime, I accompanied him to see this old man at a place where a small farm lay across a public road that led out to Warrenton. He had several sons, one about 18, and a wife and a daughter. In the summertime, the flies bothered the old fellow, as they did most, and it was a relief to him to have someone sit there, fan and drive away the flies, and speak to him. Elder bushes were used because flies don't like the smell of their bruised leaves, so I remained some time after sunset, longer than I should have. And as it was growing dark, I hastened my departure, and I went away whistling to keep my courage from failing. And I approached a small body of woods bordering my way home. As I neared these woods, I noticed a white object that at first I supposed was a small cow, a white one. But approaching it, I was surprised and frightened to see it raise 2 arms and stand with a covering of white, just like all ghosts are reputed to have. I was afraid to run and concluded I had to fight. So I found several good rocks and made for the ghost, threatening to kill it with my rocks. But I was in the act of drawing back to hurl a stone straight at it. It vanished. A true apparition. As I went on home, I had a big body of woods to pass, and some distance to go through too. You can well imagine my feelings about it. I surely did whistle the entire time, an hour at least, and even sing to keep myself in sufficient courage, but shaking, to navigate that body of woods. Somewhere outside of Warrenton, stark fear. Boys don't like to admit to themselves that they're afraid of ghosts, of anything. There was an old burying ground about 100 yards from our house, and at a sentinel there stood over it a large weeping willow tree. Near it was a marble slab at the head of a grave of an old gentleman who passed away long before the Civil War. I frequently passed near this tombstone on my way to the sheep shed where I had to go almost every night in the winter. I had heard of a ghost who was sometimes supposed to appear in and around this old graveyard. Not sure which grave. So to test myself to find out if I'm really afraid, when I was about 13, I sat on the tombstone one night and waited for results. Disrespectful. No ghost appeared, but at every strange sound, my hair would stand up on end, and a curious feeling would go down my spine. Did I just imagine it? Was it real? When I got up, I whistled all the way to the house again. I never did manage to find the courage to go back. Chapter 91. Humorous vignettes. A scary spectacle. Marge Swain, a writer for the Farmington Herald, passes along the following humorous event, told to her by a woman who was then 95 years old. The lady said when she was young, in the early 1930s, she became seriously ill one day, and the area hospital was called. The town then didn't have an ambulance, so a hearse from a local funeral parlor was dispatched. The lady was lying down in the back of the hearse when the driver suddenly had to slam on the brakes. The back door of the vehicle swung open and she sat up to see what was happening. She said the motorist following the hearse hastily swerved off the road on both sides, fully believing they had seen someone rise from the dead like Dracula. It was in the newspaper for quite a while after that, but everything was fine. Chapter 106. Historic Haunts from the Past. The Whiskey Buster. Writer Lula White, on October 2nd, 1937, told about a legendary preacher named Robert Sheffey, who had unexplainable powers. The site was Staffordville, on Route 100, and the date was 1878. During this time, a moonshine was still erected on Lockless Creek. The Christian people of the neighborhood were against this, so they asked the Reverend Sheffey to pray for the still to be destroyed. That night, there was a freshet and washed away the entire still. Later at Rocky Gap, there is a distillery that was a great evil. One of the women asked Robert Sheffey to pray for its removal. He went to prayer about it, and that night, a dead tree standing near the distillery caught fire, fell on the shanty, and destroyed the entire thing. Reverend Sheffey has been known to pray for the sick, and they would immediately get up, as well as ever. He has also been known to get off his horse and turn bugs and worms over when they were on their backs and could not.
My youngest brother, and I was telling him what had happened, and I get to the part where I'm gathering my stuff and then whatever, and there's pennies and da-da-da, and oh, what pennies, and and he stops me, and he says, "What do you mean pennies?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, pennies." And he says, "Think about it, Tempest, pennies." And it just clicked for me, just something falling in place. When I was younger, we would go to visit my great uncle Bill's house. And he was a great guy, very sweet. And when we would go visit him, he would have pennies for us. He had a bank, and it was like an old-fashioned sort of bank where there was his hand, and the little hand would shoot out. Oh, and I used to love that.
There's a statue of Benjamin Franklin that descends from its pedestal as well, and is said to dance on the streets of Philadelphia. Now, come on. We're mature adults here. But just in case, every time I go by that statue, I kind of look up, make sure it's still there. That's part of what legends are all about.
But perhaps the most haunted areas of Fort Mifflin are the casemates, dungeon-like bunkers under the ramparts near the main gate. The casemates served as bomb shelters and prison cells during the Civil War.
Haunted Places, a National Directory by Dennis Hawk, District of Columbia, D.C. The Howard House. This two-story frame house is the home of Old Howard, the ghost of an evil Marine who died in 1871. His ghost continued to haunt his wife and child, and they were forced to move out just 2 months after he passed away. His luminous apparition appeared to the new tenants, though, whom he bothered with rapping sounds at all hours of the day and the night. And on 2 nights in a row, the poltergeist pulled a bed of a sleeping couple out from under them and made grotesque groaning noises. Police investigated but could find no reason for the phenomenon, and the couple moved out immediately. In the early 1900s, a young girl sleeping in that same room was attacked by a phantom who lifted the covers. She screamed and lit a gaslight, but could not see anyone. The family moved out the next day. Old Howard must have found another outlet for his energy, because reports of his spirit have become rare in the recent years. But the house is behind the Marine Corps barracks on 9th Street between G and H, southeast. White House, second-floor halls. During William Taft's presidency, the ghost of John Adams' wife, Abigail, was first reported passing through the White House doors on the second floor. More recently, she's been reported roaming through the second-floor hallways. The footsteps of Abraham Lincoln have also been reported in this corridor by several White House residents, including Eleanor Roosevelt. Harry Truman once wrote to his wife, "I sit here in this old house all the while listening to ghosts walk up and down the hallway. At 4 o'clock, I was awakened by 3 distinct knocks on my bedroom door. No one there. Damn place is haunted, sure as shootin'." See the Truman Home, Independence, Missouri, for more. The entire second floor of the White House is the private residence of the presidential family, which means it has a long storied past, if anyone had lived there before. Maryland, Frederick, the Tyler House. A woman living in the second-floor rear apartment in this boarding home has reported regularly encountering the ghostly figure of a man with stringy hair. The white-robed figure is said to walk down the steps from the attic every night at 2:30 a.m. sharp. The house is a private residence of 112 West Church Street in Frederick. Leadersburg, the old Leader House. Residents of this 19th century home have reported eerie, moving vibrations, which they attribute to ghosts of the Leader family. James Van Leader was a Dutch Calvinist who settled in the area in the 1760s. The house was built by his descendants almost 100 years later, in 1850. Most of the odd sounds come from the basement. Although most recently, a man's apparition was photographed sitting in the front seat of an old-time car in the driveway. The town is in North Washington County, near the Pennsylvania state line. It's a private residence on Main Street in Leadersburg. New York, Kinderhook, Lindenwold. Many people have tried to identify the ghost of Lindenwold. Some say it's a butler who hanged himself in the orchard, or a woman who passed away at the gatehouse. Others believe the spirit here is none other than Aaron Burr, who hid out in the house after killing the infamously more popular Alexander Hamilton in a duel. You can see the Quantum Leap Cafe, the Francis House, and the Morris Jamel Mansion in New York City for more about this history. A white apparition has been observed by many residents of the historic home, which was built in 1797 by Judge William Van Ness. Strange odors in the kitchen and the sounds of violin playing in an empty second-floor bedroom have also been reported. Recently, a hidden room was discovered in the attic. Inside was a rocking chair, a pig whittled out of wood, and a faded calling card bearing the name of Aaron Burr. Lindenwold is a private estate near the town of Kinderhook, about 20 miles south of Albany, on the Kinderhook River. New York City, Havoc House. The basement apartment of this townhome was the home of actress June Havoc from 1962 to 1969. She noticed many strange things at the rear of the home, including inexplicable tapping and banging noises in the kitchen. It sounded as if someone were going through the cabinets for something to eat every night. Former tenants nicknamed the ghost Hungry Lucy. The Victorian apartment building is a private residence on the corner of 44th Street and 9th Avenue. New York City. Seaford. The Herman House. Police officers, reporters, and parapsychologists witnessed intense poltergeist activity in a 6-room ranch-style house for 5 weeks in 1958. The activity began on February 3rd, around 3 p.m., when bottles started popping open and pouring their contents out onto the floor. Jimmy Herman and his wife Lucille at first thought that some odd chemical reaction was causing it, until they witnessed the bottles moving across the counters in the room. When the poltergeist seemed to be harassing their 2 kids, 12-year-old James Jr. and 13-year-old Lucille, I had to name both of your kids after you, the couple called the police, called the investigators. Patrolman James Hugh and Detective Joseph Tozzi both witnessed the strange events, so they requested the Long Island Lighting Company to conduct an electromagnetic survey of the house, and they had samples of the liquid tested at the police lab in Mineola. The building department surveyed the house and they capped the chimney to rule out downdrafts. The fire department checked the old well in the front of the house and reported that the level had not changed in 5 years. The RCA sent a test truck to analyze radio frequencies, and they didn't discover anything unusual. The poltergeist activity increased in power. Bottles, figurines, knickknacks, lamps, other objects levitated or crashed to the floor. Then the poltergeist seemed to concentrate on Jimmy's room. A picture frame on his wall kept leaping to the center of the floor. His dresser moved against the door so he couldn't get out. A heavy bookcase turned upside down and wedged between the bed and the radiator, all in front of him. The news media named the poltergeist Popper because of the dozens of bottle popping incidents, and curiosity seekers from all over the nation and the world converged on the premises. Poor family. The researchers William Roll and J.G. Pratt from Duke University documented 67 separate events. The last event occurred on the evening of March 10th, 8:15. The top of a bleach bottle unscrewed and flew several inches away. And that was the last time that the Herman family heard from Popper, but it was not the last that they thought about him. The town of Seaford is located on Long Island in Nassau County, the south end of Route 135, in the South Oyster Bay. North Carolina, Siler City, the Devil's Tramping Ground. A perfect circle here. Good band, but I do not like Maynard and the Accusations. 40 feet in diameter, this perfect circle. Formed by the eternal pacing of the devil himself, they say, as he ponders new evils for mankind. No tree or plant will ever grow here, and twigs or branches placed on the path are said to be gone by the next daylight. Surrounding brush grows just up to the edge of this circle, and the early settlers attributed the barren earth to Native Americans holding ceremonies here for so long. But the circle remained long after the Native Americans had been forcibly removed from the area. A recent study by the North Carolina Department of Agriculture showed the dirt within the circle to be completely sterile, leading to speculation that the tramping ground is really the world's oldest crop circle. Siler City is in central North Carolina, at the junction of U.S. Highway 64 and 421. Pennsylvania, Bristol, the Margaret Grundy Memorial Library. The river path behind this modern library is haunted by a lantern-carrying ghost by the name of Bonaparte. In the 1800s, the Keene Mansion stood here, and the beautiful Sarah Keene was the subject of many young men's thoughts. Not the least of these was Joseph Bonaparte. brother of Napoleon. He traveled by rowboat down the Delaware River to court the young lady, who never returned his love. So his broken spirit is said to still haunt the riverbank where he wanted to see her. Margaret Grundy Memorial Library is on Radcliffe Street in Bristol, Pennsylvania. What an emo! Easton, Churchman's Business College. The ghost of a woman was seen so many times near this building that she became simply known as Easton's ghost. And although never identified, the apparition was seen on the first steps of the old First Presbyterian Church and inside the parsonage. Most sightings occurred in the 1940s and the 1950s. The church buildings later became part of a business college. Easton's on the New Jersey border, 15 miles northeast of Bethlehem on Highway 22. The business college is near Center Square. Virginia, Litchfield, Fredericksburg. The wraith of an 8-year-old girl has been seen drifting through this simple wood frame house. Sometimes her gentle voice can be heard singing in the attic. She has long brown hair and wears an old-fashioned dress with high-buttoned shoes. Since the 1920s, the sounds of an invisible carriage pulling up to the front of the house have been heard. Who the child is and what the relevance of the carriage is have never been determined. The 6-room, 2-story home was built in 1802 by the Dade family. The house is a private residence 20 miles east of Fredericksburg, at the intersection of Highway 206 and 218. Stevensburg, Salubria Mansion. The apparition of a woman with long black hair has been seen floating through the upstairs hall with her arms outstretched in front of her. She has also been seen in a full-length mirror in a bedroom on the same floor. She is thought to be the ghost of Lady Spotswood, widow of Sir Alexander Spotswood, who we've talked about before, the one who killed Blackbeard. She could also be the spirit of Mrs. Hansborough, who passed away in Lady Spotswood's former bedroom. The house was built in the 1760s, so there's quite a few candidates for who the spirit could be. Stevensburg is in Culpeper County in Northern Virginia, 30 miles west of Fredericksburg on Highway 3. Haunted Virginia. Chapter 22. Werewolves on the Prowl. Werewolves, also known as lycanthropes or wolfmen, are mythological humans with the ability to shapeshift into wolves or wolf-like creatures. Lycans. This can either be by being bitten or by being placed under a curse. The medieval chronicler Gervase of Tilbury associated the transformation with the appearance of the full moon. However, there is evidence that the association existed among the ancient Greeks, appearing in the writings of Petronius. Shapeshifters similar to werewolves are common in tales all over the world, although most of them involve animal forms besides wolves. There are traits that only a werewolf can have, like the joining of both eyebrows at the bridge of the nose, or the curved fingernails, low-set ears, and swinging stride. One method was to cut the flesh of the accused. Oh my gosh, that's just brutal. A Russian superstition tells us that a werewolf can be recognized by the bristles under their tongue. Well, that's invasive too. The appearance of a werewolf in its animal form varies from culture to culture, although they are most commonly portrayed as being indistinguishable from ordinary wolves, apart from the fact they have no tail, a trait thought characteristic of witches in animal form, and retain their human eyes and their voice, and documented as becoming weak after the transformation. So, what about the werewolf of Henrico County? There have been sightings of a werewolf there. There's no proof that it truly existed, as I could find nothing more on it other than reports circulating on the internet. Typical. It is claimed that the monster has mostly been seen in the Highland Springs area, hanging around the Confederate Hills Recreation Center and the Osborne Boat Landing. Described as human-like, with the face of an animal, it runs on all fours and its hind legs. Stands 6 foot tall, covered in gray or white hair, only been seen during the full moon. Harmless, except for charging at you. Of course, the experts in the paranormal say it's most likely a Bigfoot, or a legend. Still, the angle just smacks of a werewolf. So, a young man and his girlfriend were enjoying the full moon at Osborne Boat Landing on the deck when they heard some weird howls. The noise shocked her, and when the young man turned, he saw 2 huge, stocky-built white dogs in the light. The animals lingered for what had to be at least 10 minutes, right? Unable to run to their vehicle, the man and his girlfriend stayed on the deck, One of the creatures went over to the pavilion, leapt onto the picnic table, then jumped, ran over to their car, checked it out, and then disappeared into the woods. Now, luckily for them, the rescue came as another car drove up. First, one of the creatures howled and crashed into the woods. Both the guy and his girlfriend took their chance to escape, bolted into the car, jumped in, turned the lights on, but neither of the beasts could ever be seen, and he admitted that they would never go back there after dark. So what did they see? Werewolves? Dogs? Or something else? Chapter 25. Jersey Devil sighted in Virginia? The Jersey Devil is a famous legend of the New Jersey Pine Barrens. The creature is so famous that the New Jersey's hockey team is called the New Jersey Devils. Deep in the heart of South Jersey, there lies a huge span of tall, desolate pine barren woods. These trees give off an eerie feeling, as if you're constantly being watched by someone or something. The plants are so dense that sometimes it's hard to follow a path at all, and you never know what kind of wildlife is concealed in the brush around the corner. The legend of the devil terrorized, puzzled, and intrigued New Jersey for over 265 years, then the entire world. Since before the birth of the United States. It is a mystery that has been passed down from generation to generation and still remains unsolved. 2 centuries after the origin, there are still only myths, theories, and horrifying recounts of the sightings in the beginning. In 1735, when a pregnant Mrs. Leeds of Smithville was about to give birth one stormy night, one fateful night. This was to be her 13th child, and she was feeling old before her time, and she cursed the unborn baby during a fit of painful contractions. And she soon forgot her curse when the midwife placed a beautiful baby boy in her arms. But just then, the baby began to change, to resemble between a bat and a horse. Long dark wings sprouted from his shoulder blades, and his legs grew long and thin. Fear rose in everybody in the room as long claws sprouted from the baby's fingertips, and their eyes turned yellow. They let out a scream and then burst through the roof of the cabin, flying off into the night, never to return. Pretty creepy, right? Something out of X-Files, says Pamela K. Kinney. Though that is the most common and widely accepted version of the legend. There are other variations to the tale. There are 2 names of the Jersey Devil's mother, Mrs. Leeds and Mrs. Shrouds. Historians claim that both the Leeds and the Shrouds lived in the town of the monster's birth. Perhaps the Jersey Devil had been an illegitimate child who was cursed by the townspeople. Although most likely, the devil has a human dad. The folks at that time did not believe. They believed the creature to be of Satan himself. There are also several variations of the events. Others say that it was born as the devil and never resembled a human. Other variations say that before they flew off, they took all of the people in the cabin before them. It has also been said that for years, the Jersey Devil returned to its home and sit perched on a fence. And after a while, Mrs. Leeds or Shrouds, shooed it away, and it took off, never to return. The first 5 years after its birth were horrific. The Jersey Devil did so-called chimney raids, where it would enter a house through a chimney to terrorize the inhabitants, allegedly tear up furniture, chase people and pets, and kidnap children by dragging them up the chimney. In 1740, one clergyman decided to exorcise the Jersey Devil. The people of the Pine Barrens received instant relief as the sighting suddenly ceased. Now, what does this have to do with Virginia? Well, it seems that during this period, during the 1830s and the 1840s, the Jersey Devil decided to visit Virginia. Amongst his victims were livestock, dogs, geese, cats, ducks, even some children. Almost. The Jersey Devil finally left Virginia to reemerge in the Pine Barrens in New Jersey in 1909. During the week of January 16th to the 23rd, it was blamed for more livestock and pets and leaving hoof-like prints in, on, and around houses. Over 1,000 people in New Jersey reported encounters with the creature during that time. And not just due to mass hysteria, perhaps. So what is the Jersey Devil? More importantly, why at that time in history did it decide to come to this state and terrorize us? These questions may never be answered. But it's intriguing to wonder. And that is episode 19, I hope you enjoy, and we're going to have a season finale next episode. I'll see you then, and rock on.